Hello and welcome back, Thematic List Build fans. For those new to the series, the setup is to build a list that flexes the mechanics and themes exclusive to a faction, and when doing so, soup is off the menu. The idea is to make the army cohesive, using only the options available to the faction. And with that preamble out of the way, let's dive into one that has been highly requested, a thematic list build for the Blood Ravens. The Blood Ravens' officially published chapter tactic is Relentless Seekers, and interestingly enough, it is a direct combination of two successor chapter tactics from the newer Space Marines Codex. The first part of their tactic is Stalwart. Attacks against Blood Ravens with wound rolls of 1 or 2 always fail. While less popular, I find this one pretty neat. Speaking mechanically, to maximize its value, we want a field and infantry heavy list, as it's easier to wound on 2s versus lower toughness. Thinking on this a bit more, the most common Strength 8 weapon, which can be fired en masse, versus Marines is Plasma, which also conveniently deals 2 damage. By this logic, I garner a Toughness 4 infantry heavy Primaris list with this perk will be less vulnerable to this super effective weapon. But even that scenario aside, it's a great perk, as it caps enemy efficiency. It removes the potential value from popular stratagems which add 1 to wound rolls, and it denies enemies from leveraging abilities which reroll their wound rolls. The second part of their trait is Knowledge is Power, which allows Psykers to reroll any rolls of 1 for psychic tests or deny the witch tests. Here's some meaty thematic mechanics, as now Bloodraven Psykers are far less likely to suffer from perils of the warp and whiffs in general. Sure, it's a perk which only affects Psykers, but it will undoubtedly prove valuable when it comes to setting up plays reliant on psychic powers and denying your enemies from doing the same. But now on to a very important question. Which supplement to choose? If I am honest, I'm not a fan of conveniently grabbing a Codex supplement for the Blood Ravens to ride, when in lore, they don't have any idea who they originate from. However, I think a concession has to be made, and I decided to go with Ultramarines. For one, having a third psychic table will help the Blood Ravens feel more potent, and the Ultramarines have powers we can leverage for that purpose. For two, the Ultramarines' flavor lacks spice relative to the other supplements, such as the White Scars, Raven Guard, or Salamanders. For clarity, this isn't a negative point. It will allow the supplement's rules to support the Blood Ravens without drowning out their own flavor. It also makes sense to me as the go-to book for chapters with undefined lineages. And 3, the Ultramarine supplement from a rules perspective is quite good. Ranked against the other supplements, it offers a good balance of what I would call statistical punch versus cerebral flexibility. It was an interesting challenge to create a thematic list for the Blood Ravens, but I'm pretty pleased with what I ended up with. It aims to maximize the flavor and mechanics of what the Blood Ravens toolkit offers. The list is 1,999 points, and is themed around Psychic Mastery, and the securing of objectives, which I think reflects their pursuit of relics and knowledge nicely. So without further ado, let's take a look at the list. Starting off with the Spearhead Detachment is the leader of the army, Chapter Master of the Blood Ravens, Gabriel Angelos. He's quite expensive at 185 points, but for that price, you are getting full Chapter Master rerolls to hit, an ability which can do D3 mortal wounds on the charge, and the benefits of Terminator armor, with a movement characteristic of 6, which is nice. He lacks a ranged weapon, but his combat abilities are substantial. His hammer, Godsplitter, has 2 profiles. Mighty Strikes does 6 attacks on the charge, hitting at the standard Thunderhammer profile, but with wound rolls of 6, inflicting mortal wounds in addition. And the Sweeping Blows profile gives him 9 attacks on the charge at strength 6, AP-1, 1 damage, which grants him some good versatility. His main drawback is his lackluster Warlord trait. While it would be amazing on a beatstick like Gabriel to give him the Imperium Sword, Chapter Master Gabriel must take the Rights of War as his trait, which gives him Defenders of Humanity and an auto-pass morale aura of 6 inches. While it's not as beefy, it's thematic, so I can wear it, and you will see further down in the list we can leverage its value. Our second HQ in the Spearhead is Lieutenant in Phobos armor. Taken with grav shoots, he can descend onto the battlefield on turn 2. Between him and the Chapter Master, your units will have full reroll hits and reroll 1s to wound. Since turn 2 will be the tactical doctrine, when he arrives he will be able to take advantage of Bolter Discipline along with the bonus AP it provides to his master-crafted Oculus Bolt Rifle. Filling out the first heavy support slot is an Eliminator squad armed with las fusils. They provide 3 shots a turn, dealing a consistent 3 damage flat. Deploy them in concealed positions in cover, and leverage the +2 cover save provided by their camo cloaks. And thanks to the Ultramarines Doctrine, they'll be able to move and shoot their las fusils in the Tactical Doctrine should the need arise. The second heavy support choice is a 5-man squad of Hellblasters, taking the standard Plasma Incinerators. Nothing fancy about these guys, Hellblasters are tried and true for a good reason. With the right reroll support, which this list can provide, these 5 Marines have a staggering damage potential of 20. Providing a ride for the Hellblasters, as well as filling out our last slot of the Spearhead, is the Repulsor Executioner. The Heavy Laser Destroyer provides another potent anti-tank tool. Firing 2 shots at strength 10, it's almost certainly wounding on 3s with AP 4, dealing d6 damage, clamped to a minimum of 3. And if it moves less than half of its full movement, it can fire an additional 2 shots, which may sound like a negative with regards to its transportation of units, but thanks to the Ultramarines Doctrine, after turn 2 it'll be able to move its full distance and still double tap. On to the Battalion Detachment, starting with our troop slots. Taking up the first 2 troops choices are a 5-man and 10-man squad of Infiltrators. Yeah, these 2 squads are expensive at 330 points, and they're not as point and click as Intercessors, but in my opinion the utility they provide is not to be underrated. Firstly, they can provide very strong objective control from the start of the game, which nicely represents the Bloodraven's desire for relics. And secondly, when up against other cerebral factions, with lots of teleport or deep strike tools, denying them from leveraging their tricks will be an extremely powerful and welcomed benefit. It's worth mentioning that if the enemy can readily shift the Infiltrators off of their concealed positions, it's not worth leaving them visible. Instead, deploy them out of line of sight and move on to objectives and use smoke grenades. The large squad can be split into 2 5-man teams via the combat squad's ability if more control is necessary. The last troop's choice is a fat 10-man squad of Intercessors. The Sergeant has a chainsword, and there are 2 auxiliary grenade launchers in the squad. This unit is embarked within a standard repulsor transport. What the repulsor platform lacks in resilience versus the Land Raider, it makes up for in mobility. Having the fly keyword not only denies it from being tied up, but it makes it a far more effective transport platform. The repulsor itself is armed in a twin las cannon and las talon configuration. Back to the Intercessors. This 10-man squad serves as a dedicated anti-horde killer. Disembarking turn 2, which should be the tactical doctrine, they have a 36-inch threat range with Bolter Discipline, thanks to the Ultramarines Doctrine. Ideally, they should march out and claim a valuable objective. And the squad is a prime candidate for the 2CP stratagem Rapid Fire, which will allow them to dump out 40 shots, hitting on 3s at AP-2, 1 damage. If Gabriel Angelos arrives in range, they can reroll all hit rolls and will also be morale immune. And lastly, we are on to the leaders of this battalion, and I couldn't do a Bloodraven's list without fielding a few librarians. I've gone with 3, which adds quite a few more tricks to the list and goes a long way towards making the list not feel like a generic Space Marines army. Starting with the Primaris Librarian, I've spent 2 command points on him. 1 to make him a Chief Librarian, allowing him to cast 2 and deny 2 powers, and no 1 additional power. And the second command point was spent on Hero of the Chapter, granting him the Warlord trait Psychic Mastery, which gives him a +1 to cast on his first power. All of that said, combined with the rerolls of 1 granted by the Bloodraven's chapter tactic, our Chief Libby is quite the caster and the candidate for high-value powers. I have given him Psychic Fortress, Might of Heroes, and Null Zone. And to ensure this guy is the master of the Psychic phase, I have given him the Relic, the Reliquary of Gethalamor, which subtracts 1 from enemy Psychers' Psychic tests within 18 inches. And as a bonus, when enemy Psychers fail to cast, on a 4-up, they suffer D3 mortal wounds. Combined with his built-in Psychic Hood, if he is within 12 inches of the Psyker, he can add 1 to his deny rolls, rerolling 1s. Our second HQ is a Librarian in Phobos armor, and thanks to concealed positions, he can deploy forward supporting the Vanguard units. His powers have been pulled from the Obscuration discipline, and the first power I gave him is Temporal Corridor, which allows him to move again, but he must advance on 3 dice, choosing the highest. It's a harder cast, but it's an ability which is highly likely to more than double his maneuverability, which can be an extremely powerful tool. I am somewhat torn for his second power. Depending on your needs, he can provide powerful defensive bonuses, or be a potent force multiplier. Shrouding denies the enemy from targeting a unit unless they are the closest, great for protecting the Eliminators or a group of infiltrators holding up on a valuable objective. And Soulsight provides full rerolls to hit and denies the enemy cover. Again, both the infiltrators and Eliminators can gain good value from it, but in this case I've gone for Shrouding. But if you really can't decide, you could give him the relic, the Tome of Malkador, so he could take all 3 powers. And the last HQ is the Librarian in Terminator armor. He has a Stormbolter and Force Stave, and offers further flexibility as he can come down where you need him. Just keep in mind that he's slow once he's on the ground. I have given him 2 powers from the Ultramarines Indomitus discipline. The first is Psychic Shackles, which can provide a nifty half movement, -1 to advance and charge roll debuff on a target enemy. It's situational, but it can be very powerful for objective play. The second, and admittedly more exciting power in my opinion, is Empiric Channeling. At only Warp Charge 5, it's pretty easy to cast, and it grants a friendly Psyker within 12 inches a +2 to their cast and removes Perils of the Warp on double 1s and 6s. When used on our Chief Librarian, it grants him a whopping +3 on his first cast, making even our man blush. It greatly increases the likelihood of Super Smite, and all but ensures critical powers like Null Zone won't whiff. And that's the list. It comes to 1999 points, and has a total of 7 CP. I didn't want to make a typical 2-battalion Space Marine list, so instead I went with a list that offered strong objective secure, packs some punchy anti-armor, and contains a trio of Psykers, which should create opportunities for some cagey plays. Thanks for watching. This was a fun one to put together, and I hope you guys found it enjoyable. If you did, give this video a like. It's much appreciated. Also, what do you think of the format? Using the BatRep list assembler to help showcase the units of the list does make things far more manageable from an editing perspective. With that in mind, feedback is welcome. And feel free to let me know if there are future factions you would like to see covered in the series. As always, subscribing is the best way to help this channel grow. Thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you guys in the next one.